Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling Gigantomania. It's an idea from ancient Greek, basically meaning a madness for giant things.
Yeah, like this impulse to build or create things that aren't just big, but, unusually, maybe even superfluously large.
Exactly. And we've got some really interesting sources that, well, they explore this phenomenon across different times, different political systems.
Right, from the ancient world right up to the 20th century, and even touches on today.
So our mission really is to get into what's behind this urge for the massive. Why build so incredibly big?
hmm What are the motivations?
Yeah, we're going to look at, colossal architecture, these super heavy weapons that seem almost impractical.
Definitely. And vast infrastructure projects, too. Think pyramids, think giant tanks, massive avenues.
It's quite a range. Let's dive in.
And it's important to remember our sources suggest it's rarely just about the size itself. There are often deeper things going on, social, political, ideological currents.
Okay, so this isn't exactly a new thing then, this going big.
Oh, not at all. It seems it's been around for ages. Our sources point to megalithic cultures, Stonehenge and the like.
Right.
Then you've got ancient Egypt, obviously, with the pyramids and temples. Ancient Rome, their engineering was on a huge scale.
Aqueducts, the Colosseum.
Exactly. Ancient China, too. The Great Wall, Grand Canals, even the Aztecs, their temple complexes were immense. So there's definitely a historical precedent. They set the stage, sort of.
It's like this long-standing human desire to just leave a massive footprint. But it feels like it really kicked into high gear maybe in the 20th century, especially with totalitarian regime.
That's where the connection between this gigantomania and political ideology gets really stark.
Yeah.
Take Stalin's Soviet Union.
Okay.
The whole drive for rapid modernization, this push to prove socialism was superior to capitalism.
Yeah.
Got tied up with these enormous projects.
So we're talking things like Magnitogorsk, those huge industrial cities.
Precisely. Magnitogorsk, massive collective farms, huge dams, canals, those giant statues you see everywhere.
And the scale itself was the point.
Well, yeah, partly. It wasn't just about production, though that was important. It was a visual statement. This vastness was meant to show the power, the forward momentum of the socialist system.
Making capitalism look small by comparison.
That was the idea. And more than that, these huge sites were kind of meant to forge a new Soviet identity. Collective strength, monumental achievement, replacing older loyalties.
Interesting. And didn't the sources say these places, these huge construction sites, also served as like ideological training centers?
That's right, a dual purpose. They weren't just factories or dams. They were places to actively mold the workforce, turn peasants into industrial workers who bought into the ideology.
Wow. Okay. And what about Stakhanovism? That whole thing about breaking production records. How does that fit?
Well, Stakhanovism is another side of the same coin, really. It's part of that same drive for the biggest, the best, the most. It wasn't just hitting targets. It was constantly smashing them, pushing beyond limits. It fed into that image of unstoppable socialist progress. The idea of gigantic output was key.
So Stalin dies, but this tendency, it doesn't just stop.
No, it carries on, though maybe the intense ideological fervor cools a bit, but you still see huge projects like the Dnieper hydroelectric station, the Kubyshev one.
Magnitogorsk keeps growing.
Yep. And plans for things like the Palace of the Soviets or massive monuments like the Motherland Calls, the White Sea Canal.
Yeah.
That scale remains appealing.
Okay, let's switch gears to Nazi Germany. Hitler, he seems to have had a particular obsession with architecture, right?
Oh, absolutely fundamental for him. He literally called architecture the word in stone. He saw it as completely tied to politics.
How so?
He believed it showed whether a civilization was rising or falling. So he wanted buildings on a scale that would just blow people away. Impress foreigners, sure, but also future generations, cementing the thousand-year Reich.
And he had a specific style in mind.
Very much so. That kind of monumental neoclassical style, often done by architects like Albert Speer, it was meant to look powerful, permanent, evoking, ancient Rome.
And the effect on people, it wasn't just about being impressed, was it? There was something else.
Yes, and this is a really crucial kind of disturbing point our sources make. The sheer scale was deliberate. It was meant to make the individual feel small, insignificant, overwhelmed by the state's grandeur.
To make them more controllable.
Essentially, yes. Diminish the individual, emphasize the collective power embodied by the Nazi state, make people more receptive to the ideology. It taps into something. Well, sometimes it seems to border on grandiose thinking, this belief in absolute power needing absolute scale.
It's chilling. And this wasn't just buildings, right? You mentioned tanks earlier. These incredibly heavy tanks.
Yes, a perfect example of Gigantomania winning out over actual military usefulness. Hitler demanded these super heavy tanks.
It's like the Rat and the Monster.
Exactly. The Landkreuzer Rat and the P-1500 Monster. Almost unbelievable designs. Huge, intimidating maybe, but incredibly impractical on a real battlefield.
So it's the idea of the giant size that matters most.
It seems so. And you see it elsewhere, too. The Atlantic Wall fortifications, that incredibly ambitious Breitsbourbon wide-gauge railway plan.
The Deutsches Stadion for rallies.
Huge stadium plans, yes. The whole concept of the Führerstadt, rebuilding cities, massive H-class battleships, and of course Welthauptstadt, Germania, the plan for Berlin as this global capital. Just staggering scale.
And the sources also nod towards fascist Italy and Maoist China having similar tendencies.
Yeah, they get mentioned briefly. While we're not diving deep into those specifics today, the pattern seems consistent. Totalitarian regimes using monumental projects to project power and ideology. We see it in the USSR, in Nazi Germany. It seems to be a common tool in that kind of state playbook.
Okay. Then there's North Korea under Kim Il-sung. They apparently took a lot of inspiration from the Soviets, especially with engineering projects.
Yes, particularly those huge Stalinist-style hydroelectric projects. But what's really interesting in the North Korean case is how explicitly it was tied to their own ideology, Juche.
How did that work?
These massive engineering feats were presented as proof that humans could transform nature according to their will, a core idea of Juche. So, damming rivers, moving mountains, it became a symbolic victory, reinforcing the ideology.
And not just engineering, the cities too, Pyongyang.
Absolutely. The way Pyongyang was rebuilt and expanded, just vast. High-rise apartment blocks, some apparently 30 stories high, connected by these incredibly wide avenues. One supposedly had 13 lanes.
13 lanes.
It all creates this visual landscape of immense scale, reflecting the power of the state and, the leader.
And our sources mention that North Korea kept doing this, building huge monuments and things, even after the Soviets started moving away from the really extreme stuff during de-Stalinization.
That persistence is really notable. You have things like the Arch of Triumph, bigger than the one in Paris. Deliberately, the Kumsusan Palace of the Sun, where the leaders lie in state, the Tower of the Juche idea, the huge West Sea barrage.
Wow.
It shows this ongoing commitment to the monumental as a way to assert authority and build that personality cult, even when other communist states were perhaps scaling back.
It's fascinating. And then the sources also point it closer to home, suggesting that even in contemporary capitalist countries, you see forms of this, like skyscrapers, giant shopping malls.
Yeah, that's an interesting point they raised. The motivations might be different, maybe less overt political ideology, more economic competition, corporate bragging rights, perhaps.
Sure.
But the result is still these unusually large, sometimes arguably superfluous structures. It kind of suggests this human impulse towards the monumental just finds different justifications depending on the system.
So if we try and pull it all together, looking across all these examples, what are the common threads, the motivations that keep popping up?
Well, the big ones seem to be about demonstrating power and superiority, political, ideological, economic, whatever it is. There's often a strong element of social engineering, trying to shape people's identity and beliefs through these physical forms.
Right, like making them feel small or part of something huge.
Exactly. And then there's just the desire to impress your own people, impress outsiders, impress history, maybe.
It comes back to that idea of leaving a massive mark, doesn't it? Almost beyond human scale. The sources even mentioned related ideas like megalomania or grandiose delusions.
Yeah, those terms hint at the psychological side, don't they? That maybe sometimes there's an inflated sense of self-importance or power driving this need for the gigantic.
So we've definitely taken a deep dive into this giant madness, gigantomania across so much history, so many different places. It's clearly way more than just building big things.
Absolutely. We've seen how creating these unusually superfluously large things is tangled up with political power, ideology, shaping society.
And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What is it in us that keeps pushing for this massive scale? Is it just about function, or is there something deeper, some psychological need maybe, or a societal one?
That's really the question to chew on now, isn't it?
Yeah.
As you look around today, where do you see echoes of this? Is it just in buildings? Or maybe in tech? Big data.
Yeah.
Huge corporate mergers. Where does this impulse show up now?
That's a great point. And maybe a final thought. In a world where we talk more and more about efficiency, sustainability, maybe, a more human scale, What's the future for these kinds of monumental projects? What message do they even send anymore?
Exactly. What does it mean to build really big today? What does that tell us about where we are and maybe where we're going? That's the question we'll leave you with.